रिकॉर्डिंग ऑन।
थैंक यू। आज हम YouTube लाइव पे नहीं जा रहे हैं एंड इफ पार्टिसिपेंट्स वुड रिक्वायर तो फिर हम लोग बाद में YouTube पे डाल देंगे वीडियो हमारी। सो यस, good evening to all. I am CA Neha Aggarwal, General Secretary of Voice of CA. I welcome you all, a very warm welcome on this Friday evening. Today, Voice of CA has brought to you the analysis of the most talked about case of Safari retreats, followed by the hot topic of how to reply to Section 74 notices. In fact, आज ही मैं इस पे एक वीडियो भी बना रही थी। So, yes, Voice of CA is an NGO founded in 2009 by CCM CA Sanjay Kumar Aggarwal along with some like-minded professionals. It was one of the first platforms to realize the power of internet and to begin sending professional updates to members through emailers. And again, we were the first platform to introduce webinars during COVID. Since then, it has now grown into a big team which sends professional updates via WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, email, YouTube, and whatnot. We now also have a job vacancy Facebook group, which helps many members fill tax, finance, professional vacancies in their offices. We have been actively doing seminars, webinars on various burning topics and offer networking opportunities to our members, just like today. We also conduct holistic living programs for our members, including yoga camps, meditation classes, and more. In September, we also launched our audit query WhatsApp group, where our learned panelists are answering audit queries of our members on a real-time basis, including GST audit. मैं इसका लिंक आप लोगों को चैट बॉक्स में शेयर कर दूंगी, from where you can get access to that WhatsApp group and ask your questions to our learned panelists. जब आप टैक्स ऑडिट जीएसटी ऑडिट कर रहे होगे, टैक्स ऑडिट का तो सीजन खत्म हो गया और हमारे पैनलिस्ट आपके क्वेश्चंस आंसर करेंगे. We have two very learned speakers amongst us today, CA Kamal Aggarwal sir and CA Ayush Aggarwal. And I would like to thank my co-host Yugal to join us today. Uh, um, Thank you for taking out the time, Yugal.
Thanks, Neha.
I would quickly like to introduce Ayush now, who is a chartered accountant as well as an advocate. His area of expertise is IDT litigation, advisory and audit, and GST due diligence and compliance review. He has over 10 years of experience in the field and has done stints under the best at AK Batra and Company and Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan. He would be taking up the he would be taking up the Safari Retreats analysis today. And happy to have you on Voice of C again, Ayush. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Neha. थोड़ा सा डर गया था मैं बीच में इंटरमीडिएट कहाँ से आ गया बट
हाँ पिछली बारी करा था हमने इंटरमीडिएट.
So at the outset I would like to thank team Voca for giving me this opportunity, for inviting me again on the platform, and it's my pleasure to speak, to share the dice, or to speak with Kamal Aggarwal sir, who is a veteran speaker. So yeah, the time slot that I've been given is obviously 20 minutes to give justice to this topic so that everyone can hear to Kamal sir what they are here for. The most celebrated judgment, Safari Retreat, Supreme Court. Safari Retreats शुरू हुआ उड़ीसा हाई कोर्ट से, wherein the constitutional validity of section 17(5)(c) and 17(5)(d) was challenged. And Orissa High Court held that, yes, they are constitutionally not valid, and therefore ITC on works contract or ITC of the goods and services used for construction should be allowed and whatnot. Matter went on to the Supreme Court. There were basically three broad questions before the Supreme Court to decide. One is whether the plant and machinery as defined under explanation to section 17 also applies to the expression plant or machinery as used in clause 17(5)(d). Why I say this is because in 17(5)(c) word plant and machinery is used, and in 17(5)(d) word plant or machinery is used. Second is if the definition given in the act plant and machinery is not applicable on the expression plant or machinery, then what is the meaning of plant? What is the meaning of machinery as used in 17(5)(d)? Third is whether section 17.5C and 17.5D are constitutionally valid or not. Why the word plant and machinery or plant or machinery played the important role in this judgment was because, to give you the background, 17.5 is the section which blocks the credit. So there are various activities of goods and services which are listed out under section 17.5, which says that ITC of such will not be allowed. 17.5C and 17.5D are such clauses. However, there is an exception carved out for both these clauses. 17.5C is applicable on works contract, and 17.5D is used for goods or services used for the construction. However, there is an exception carved out for plant or machinery or plant and machinery in both the clauses. So if it is a construction of plant and machinery, or the works contract is for plant and machinery, then ITC should be allowed. The Safari Retreats judgment, the facts of the case were, there was a mall constructed by the party, and the entire mall was given on rent to different or to parties. Various shops in that mall were given on rent, and the party claimed the credit of the ITC that was available to them on the construction activity, that they have paid to their vendors when they purchase various goods or services to construct that mall. The only contention or the reasoning behind claiming that credit was that since my output liability is taxable and input is being directly used for output liability, that mall is directly generating output liability, therefore ITC should be allowed. However, department disallowed such ITC, saying that there is a clause in section 17.5 according to which the ITC is blocked, and therefore whatever credit you have claimed is incorrect. The points that were put before the Supreme Court were that what is defined under the GST law is plant and machinery. The word plant and machinery is defined under, the word plant and machinery is used under the GST law n number of times. It is not such that word plant and machinery or plant or machinery are used interchangeably, or somewhere it is plant and machinery or somewhere it is plant or machinery. No. Everywhere the word plant and machinery is used, and only under clause D word plant or machinery is used. Therefore, definition as given under explanation to section 17 of the word plant and machinery should not apply to plant or machinery. Supreme Court was convinced with this argument. The department put forth the submissions that no, the plant or machinery, the word or has been mistakenly written over there. It should be read as plant and machinery only. But the court noticed that again, plant and machinery has been used everywhere except for 17.5D. So it cannot be a mistake, first. Secondly, in the model GST law, word plant and machinery was used under clause 17.5D. So how can there be a change, an unintentional change from model GST law to the GST Act? So this change was not unintentional. There was something in the mind of the legislature which forced them to change the expression plant and machinery to plant or machinery. Therefore, the definition of plant and machinery given under the Act will not apply to plant or machinery. Now the question comes, then what is the meaning of the word plant? The word plant is not defined anywhere under the GST law. Supreme Court resorted to various judgments under the Income Tax Act, wherein the word plant was defined by the courts. Functionality test was laid down in all those judgments, though that was in respect of the rate of depreciation to be claimed. Judgment like Taj Mahal hotels, Anand theaters were quoted, and Supreme Court heavily relied on those judgments. And they very well said that plant is something which is used for the production. So I'll divide this discussion in two parts, whether it is a means of production or it is a place of production. If the building is a means of production, it is a plant. If the building is a place of production, it is not a plant. Means of production, that building is directly helping you to generate the revenue. Place of production, you have set up a factory, then you have set up machineries in that, and then you are doing production. So that factory is a place of production, not a means of production.
आयुष, एक रिक्वेस्ट आई है थोड़ा सा लाउडली बात करने के लिए.
अच्छा.
थोड़ा सा स्लाइट.
Sorry, actually my throat is not well today. From
अच्छा
past
तभी.
week.
So sorry.
So is it okay now? हाँ. तो means of production or place of production, functionality test from various Supreme Court judgment was used, and the matter was remanded back to the High Court to decide on the basis of facts whether this mall is a plant or not. Supreme Court in its judgment in conclusion in para 65 also said that building, mall, warehouse or any other building except hotels and cinemas. So they have said that hotels and cinemas are only buildings, they are not plant and machinery. The functionality test, if at all to be applied, is to be applied on malls, is to be applied on warehouses or any other building. If these fulfill the criteria of the term plant, that is, they are directly being used as a means of production, then ITC will be allowed. Otherwise, ITC will not be allowed. This was the major crux of the decision. Third question is the constitutional validity of section 17.5C and 17.5D. This was held against the SECI. Supreme Court very beautifully said, and there were in previous judgments also, and I do also agree, ITC is a vested right. ITC is a right granted by the statute and which can also be taken away by the statute. Second, they said is the economic laws have wider latitude than the civil laws. Constitution has the power to go to slightly extend their arms and create a discrimination in economic laws, though they do not have the power as such power in civil laws. Therefore, if a ITC has been given to you by the statute, then only you can claim the credit. Otherwise, you cannot claim the credit. If 17.5C and D blocks the credit, no matter what, if it is discriminatory, statute has the right, parliament has the right, and they can very well take away that credit of yours. Third was the constitutional validity of section 16.4 was also challenged. That was also denied by the Supreme Court and held that there is no arbitrariness under section 16.4. Whatever the time limit is given under section 16.4 are valid, and therefore it cannot be struck down. So these were the major 3 points which were discussed in the analysis of safari retreats. Now, important aspect of this judgment is that how do we apply it in our daily life? How do we advise the clients on the basis of this judgment? What, according to my view, is again we will have to wait for the Orissa High Court judgment on this, wherein they decide on the basis of the facts of that case that whether mall is a plant or not. And again, all the buildings has to pass the functionality test of the plant. And again, if it is directly being used, if we can say, yes, this building is directly being built to generate the revenue, then we can take the ITC. Otherwise, the ITC will not be allowed. So, yeah, this was all in the Supreme Court judgment. I think I will have to give some time to Kamal sir as well. So, Neha, Kamal sir, do you have any views in this?
I think, Ayush, this certainly a very short time window was available to you for Safari retreat. And I would request Neha to have a full session, maybe a 3-hour session on Safari retreat, because this is such a complicated issue. Only thing, a practical advice I would like to give to our professional brothers and to the clients, that now there is a beautiful functionality in GSTN. Although GSTN has provided a lot of things which are kind of, they operate in their own wisdom, not as per the GST Act or this thing. There is another body which got created. We had a GST Council, we had a Parliament, and now we have a GSTN. Okay, so who is supreme, we do not know. But now you have a functionality of temporary reversal. So whenever, whether it is a block credit of this plant and machinery or building or anything, it is beautiful for people now to avail the credit and then do a temporary reversal. And once we have a various high court decision and we have a better clarity on the subject, they can go back, revisit that temporary reversal and do it a permanent reversal or reclaim the credit. So that saves them from the any downside of claiming, while it also kind of protect them. So that's only thing I want to say. Maybe then we can, Neha, over to Neha to move to the SCN, and then we can have a combined question answer session at the end. Ayush would be there?
Actually, I will have to leave. So if we can have question answer.
Sir, एक या दो questions ले लेते हैं in 5 minutes.
Please go ahead. Yes.
In 5 minutes.
Sure.
हाँ. We have 2 hand raises. Kothari sir, I am allowing you to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, Kamal sir, good afternoon to you. Thanks for your advice. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, so my question is that although on the portal there is a utility to temporarily reverse and reclaim it, but whether there is any support from the provisions of the law or rules on this, whereby whatever we do has got authority of law?
You are only on the temporary reversal, right?
Correct, sir.
So temporary reversal, actually, see, as I mentioned, GSTN is doing a lot of things which do not have a authority or law. But this is a provision which we used to do earlier as well. And even if you say that in case of non-payment of consideration within 180 days, you can do a reversal and reclaim. And now the rule 49 specifically provides that there is no time limit there on reclaiming. So while at the time of claiming you have a time limit provided under section 16, there is no time limit for reclaiming. So even even if GSTN would not have provided you that kind of facility, still it was available to you to do that in 3V. But in that case, documentation at your end could have become challengeable. Now, because of GSTN, it amounts to kind of intimating to the authority, and tomorrow's suppression, etc., cannot be challenged.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Surendra sir, kindly take up your question. Surendra sir, can you hear us? Please take up your question. Members, if you have any other questions in respect to Safari retreats, request you to please write it in the chat box or raise your hand so that we can quickly resolve it and move forward. Munafji, I have unmuted you. Please take up your question. Munafji, please unmute yourself if you have a question. Please go ahead. Ayush, can you hear? Can you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, you can hear me, but Munaf, are you able to
I
hear
cannot hear
Munaf?
Munaf, sir. No, I cannot hear.
I'm also not able to hear anybody. Only
Munaf, could you please take up your question? We are unable to hear you, Munaf. आप एक बार अपना system check कर लीजिए, please.
Anybody else would like to take up the question?
नहीं और कोई hand raise नहीं है, Ayush. I would request you to maybe stay back for 5 minutes.
Sure.
If there's any particular question. And in the meanwhile, I'll proceed a little bit forward. I would like to again welcome my co-host for today, CA Yugal Goyal. He has over 8 years of experience in GST, customs, including FTP, service tax, and other allied laws. He's also an avid speaker and is working with a plethora of industries. We welcome you, Yugal, and I would request you to please introduce Kamal sir for today.
Thanks, Neha. Thanks a lot. We welcome you, Kamal sir. Very good evening. A pleasure to brief about you. CA Kamal Aggarwal sir is a qualified chartered accountant in 1991. He specializes in indirect tax, including FTP, customs duty, excise duty, service tax, VAT, and GST. With extensive experience at Indian CA firms and the Big Four, he offers representation before appellate authorities, tribunals, and briefing advocates for High Courts and Supreme Court. His advisory role extends to assisting clients during indirect tax investigations by various authorities. As a seasoned speaker at esteemed platforms like NIRC, ICA Study Circles, CII, and ASSOCHAM, he shares valuable insights in this field. We welcome you, sir. Over to you. Thank you.
thank you, Neha. Thank you, Yugal. And welcome to all other participants. Let me share my screen.
Ayush, there's one question by Kothari ji. He maybe, if you can just type it to him in the Q&A box and close it.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is it visible?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Perfect. And I'm audible as well.
Yes.
Perfect. So friends, addressing show cause notice, and this is a very, very important topic because historically our, not the younger generation, but people in my generation used to deal mostly with audit, with income tax, and subsequently they started working in VAT, where the concept of show cause notice was not that elaborate. And in service tax, this concept came in, but with the GST, the kind of notices that we are seeing, they are very elaborate. They are of the topics which we have not dealt with earlier. And show cause notice is an extremely important stage of indirect tax litigation. And therefore, it is very important to understand how to respond to a show cause notice. My topic is Section 74. We will deal with Section 74, but my endeavor is that, like, take an example of a cricketer. So if you want to kind of learn betting, you will not learn betting on to a fast bowler, or a spinner, or to off spinner, or whatever. You will learn betting. Okay, then whatever bowler comes in doesn't matter. Similarly, I would urge each one of you to learn the art of responding to a show cause notice. whether it is 73, whether it is 74, whether it is 122, 129, that shouldn't matter. What you should learn that what are the key features, what are the essentials of show cause notice, how to draft a reply. Those are the factors that you should learn. And once you learn and you master the art of responding to show cause notice, then you would have learned then 74, 73, 75, that doesn't matter. Second advice I would give to my friends is that respond to each show cause notice as if this case is definitely going to go to Supreme Court. Because you do not know which case will travel to what level. You should ensure that whatever grounds, whatever submission on facts, etc., you take them at first level. Of course, there are judgments you can take additional ground of appeal at various level. You can submit additional facts up to tribunal. But in my experiences, that whatever you have not submitted to the original authority, it becomes extremely, extremely difficult. So be extremely careful in responding to the show cause notice. Once show cause notice is received, be very careful, be very thorough, and put in all whatever arguments, facts, submission you want to take, do in there. Now let's deal with section 74. 74, my dear friends, has a very, very wide scope. It says where it appears. Appears तो कुछ भी हो सकता है. So मुझे लग रहा है आयुष जी बहुत बढ़िया स्पीकर हैं, किसी को हो सकता है नहीं भी लग रहा हो. So where it appears is a very wide word, and we have used where reasons to believe, reasons to doubt, all those kind of phrases. There are reason to believe. We have dealt with several cases in income tax and other laws, but here where it appears, and we'll talk about what courts have said where it appears. Now 74 talks about only three kind of notices. Any tax has not been paid or short paid, erroneously refunded, or input tax credit has been wrongly availed or utilized. Then by reasons of fraud, any willful misstatement or suppression of facts to evade tax. So friends, there are three conditions that has to be satisfied before a show cause notice can be issued or validly issued under 74. Department can issue, of course, but can be validly issued. So first, there should be three. The nature of transaction should be three: tax has not been paid or short paid, erroneously refunded, or ITC wrongly availed or utilized. It should be for the reason of fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts. But doing fraud is not enough unless it is with an intention to evade tax. So there are three conditions. One is the nature of transaction. Second is the reason, fraud, willful, and ultimate intention, that should be to evade tax. If any of these conditions is missing, then it is not a valid notice under section 74. Moving forward, where it talks about where it appears. Now, Delhi High Court has said where it appears is indicative of prima facie opinion. He has to prima facie opinion. Okay, it doesn't have to form an opinion. It doesn't have to give you that. Okay, Andhra Pradesh High Court said where it appears to proper officer imply free, unfettered, and unbound usage. So basically, as the entire word open to it. Okay, tomorrow even courts have not gone into whether there was sufficient reasons to believe. Where it appears is a very, very wide term. So I would say it can appear to proper officer. It can appear anything. And there is no requirement of any prior proceedings. It can come from ASMT 10, it can come from audit, it can come from investigation, or it can come from anything. Proper officer might have read a newspaper article in the morning. GST evasion is being going on a particular industry, and he can initiate inquiry or issue notice. It is only as simple as that. It can only be, it appears. So even if when there is no requirement of a prior proceeding, If proceeding was defective, then it doesn't matter. We have seen a recent case where audit was defective. Court says, okay, fine. So he is proceeding. It appears to him. So prior proceeding is not required. When it is not required, even if it is defective, it doesn't matter. Then we go further. As I mentioned, Section 74 can be used only for these three cases. Now we have several other cases. SCN can be issued, I think, in 10 or 12 cases under GST. I've just mentioned three. Maybe for cancellation of registration, penalty for e-way bill, offences under 122. SCN under 74 cannot be issued for these kind of offences. But when any penalty or any offence require a determination of tax, then perhaps he has to go to 73 or 74. That is an issue that we need to address, that probably court will address in appropriate proceedings. But one example comes to my mind. Let's say on a check post or a flying squad, they alleges that the goods are undervalued. Now, if the goods are undervalued, that requires determination of tax, determination of value. Okay, that determination of value, one has to come back to 73 or 74. That notice has to be 73, 74, read with Section 129. So in those cases, there may be combination of sections that would have to be invoked, but otherwise, Section 74 is restricted only to these three proceedings. Let's go further. We had a huge litigation under service tax, and first Delhi High Court case was in Beda, which is now pending in Supreme Court. There were several circulars were issued that in case of a show cause notice exceeding 50 lakh, pre-SCN consultation was mandatory. Pre-SCN consultation was indirectly brought in the GST law by way of a rule 142(1)(a), where you have to issue DRC 1A and then you seek a response from the client, from the taxpayer, and then issue a show cause notice. Sometime back, the rule was amended and the word shall was changed to may. And that led to a understanding that this 142(1)(a) requirement and in form of DRC 1A is not mandatory. Now, plain reading of that rule gives that impression. But there is also a requirement under 73(5) or 74(5) where the proper officer, because 73, 74(5), where you pay tax either on your own ascertainment or on ascertainment by a proper officer. And if you pay tax along with interest and whatever penalty is there under 74(5), the proceeding shall conclude and the proper officer will not issue a show cause notice. But let's assume that proper officer has ascertained the tax liability. How he will communicate? There is no mechanism for a proper officer to communicate the tax liability on his own ascertainment. And when 74(5) option is there in the statute books, any proceeding bypassing that said provision would have to be held as invalid. So in my humble view, where there is no other mechanism or no other opportunity for a proper officer to communicate, the DRC 1A still remains a mandatory feature. And a summary also is a mandatory feature in form of DRC 01. But it is not a substitute of show cause notice. It is only a summary. In Delhi High Court, in this one case, has said that while summary is mandatory, but the purpose will be served or assessee is not prejudiced if the summary is allowed at a later stage also. So while the summary is mandatory, but as per Delhi High Court, it can be issued at a later stage. But what stage? Not before you have filed a reply or something, you can always say that we have received show cause notice, but we have not received the summary. So kindly issue summary in form of DRC01 so that we can proceed further. Now, we just talked about legal provision, but let's expand the scope and go beyond. What is this genesis of show cause notice? Why show cause notice is so important? Okay, we have this legal frame, odi alteram partem, which says that no person should contempt unheard. It is a basis of the principle of natural justice. Our constitution has adopted rule of law. Our constitution has adopted equity before law. Now, equity before law would require equals to be treated equals and unequals not to be treated as equals. Now, unless an authority issues notice to, let's say, two offenders, hear them, only thereafter it will be able to decide whether who was offender or who was not offender. If he passes the same judgment to both the person and one of them was guilty, one of them was not guilty, then it is violative of Article 14. So therefore, the principle of natural justice, the show cause notice are embedded in our constitutional provisions. So even if there is no specific provision under the law, unless there is a specific prohibition, the requirement to issue show cause notice would have to be read. So department has to issue a notice if they want to proceed against you. Brindavan Beverages is a very famous case in this. They say SCN is a foundation on which department has to build up its case. And it also says the allegation in SCN must be specific and not vague. So it is very important. It is the foundation of any indirect tax litigation. Metal forging, Supreme Court says, is a mandatory requirement. So SCN has to be there. It has to be very specific. It should not be vague, and it should not be issued with a predetermined mindset. Or especially Supreme Court has said, and if SCN language is such that it says that it gives you an impression that SCN has been issued as a mere formality and the department has already made up its mind, and that is conveyed through the language of the SCN, you can take it to a writ court. You can say that SCN has been issued with a predetermined mindset, and it is violative of natural justice because it is not giving me a reasonable opportunity. So it is very clear that SCN cannot be issued with a predetermined mindset. And that is the importance of SCN. So please take response to SCN extremely careful. Now, what are the essentials of SCN? Good SCN has to have a background of the case. SCNs are generally issued after investigation. So it should give you background of the investigation, that there was a investigation, there was an audit, there was a search, there was ASMT 10, there was scrutiny of returns, whatever. It has to give you background of the case. It has to give you history of investigation. It has to give background about the business of the assessee. Then it has to have a discussion on the facts, what is the legal framework, and the documents that SCN is relied upon, which we call it RUDs. So it has to have that discussion. On the basis, it has to allege the merits. Merit means where there are violations. That based on the facts and the legal framework, these are the allegations that are there. Under 74, a prerequisite is that it should be fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression. The specific allegations must be made in SCN for all three. SCN has to have a calculation of tax and other amounts. It has to have allegations of penalty, statement of charges, that what are the charges to be levied against you. It has to tell you what is the time period to reply, generally which is 30 days. It has to tell you to which authority you have to file your reply and a signature. So any good SCN has to have all of these requirements if it has to qualify or pass the test of a good or a valid SCN. There was a beautiful master circular. It was issued in pre-GST regime, but that's very valid in GST regime as well. And I would urge my professional brothers or sisters to go through this circular. It's a very detailed, very good circular, and it teaches you a lot about how to deal with indirect tax litigation. So go through the circular. That circular also lists down these elements as essential elements of a SCN. We had recently a dispute about signatures. Rule 26 sub-rule 3 provides that every document, notice, order should have a digital signature or e-signature as provided by Information Technology Act or any other mode notified by the board. We know no mode has been notified. The argument was made by the revenue before AP High Court that uploading an order on portal is a valid. It doesn't require signature. But Honorable High Court has said that on uploading of order on a portal is a manner of service. It's not a substituted digital signature. And Delhi High Court has also said that signatures are mandatory. Now, given this background, we are seeing GSTN advisory, very recent advisory. They said documents are issued through common portal. The authorities log in at using their digital signature. And therefore, if the notices are issued without digital signature, they are still valid. In my humble view, first of all, GSTN is nobody to issue that advisory. It doesn't have any authority of law to issue advisory on a legal matter, particularly when that advisory seems to be violating Rule 26 sub-rule 3 and going in the teeth of at least two High Court decisions. And there is a very old decision of Calcutta High Court which says SCN without signature is a body without a soul. So in my humble view, the GSTN advisory is beyond its mandate as well as it is contrary to law. So please, whenever you find a SCN or an order which is not neither digitally signed nor e-signed, please challenge that on the ground that it is non-est, it doesn't exist in law, and therefore not a valid document. Then we come to DIN. DIN is mandatory in all the documents issued by Central GST Authority. We all know that now. We all know the famous statement by our finance minister that if there is no DIN, you can throw that in dustbin. But don't take that literally. Don't throw that in dustbin, but you can take that ground. But in case of documents issued by state, the Honorable Supreme Court has issued an advisory, but that is not a mandatory thing. So in case of SCN issued by central authorities, you must ensure that DIN is there. If it is not DIN, it is not a mandatory valid document. But in case of state, you cannot take that argument. So for state, you have to proceed without DIN. But all other requirements of a notice are applicable equally to state as well as center. Now, what are the essentials of SCN? We are continuing with that. As I mentioned, there are relied upon documents. So whatever, sometime the department conducts a search or a scrutiny of returns, they seek information, they get information from DGRM, they get information from income tax, they can get information from various other sources, which are relied upon while issuing the SCN. Now, it is a very settled principle of law that whatever evidence is to be used for against an assessee, that evidence must be shared with him. Unless that evidence is shared with him, that cannot be used. So in that light, it is mandatory for department to provide a copy of relied upon document, even if it is not asked by the taxpayer. So in fact, there is no need for a taxpayer to ask them. It is duty of the department to provide them along with show cause notice. Show cause notice to be issued electronically. That was an MP High Court decision. Madras High Court has said that it should be in the view notices tab, not in the additional notices. And if it is there in additional notice, it is not a valid service. So keep that in mind. Now I'm being told that department has stopped putting in additional notices. That is coming in view notices only. But if you have a show cause notice in additional notices tab, you can argue that that was not a valid service. Delhi High Court has also said that same officer who has conducted search, seizure cannot adjudicate the SCN. So you cannot be kind of prosecutor or judge in your own case. And there is another decision of Allahabad High Court that service of SCN on the accountant is not a valid form of service. So all these arguments can be used while you are drafting a reply. But what you should do when you receive the show cause notice. So first, if you receive a notice by, let's say, speed post or a registered thing, retain the envelope and the original SCN. Retain evidence of the date of receipt. I have seen in argument, in my case only, the DR was saying that no, it was served on that day. I said it was not served on that day particular. And we argued, we won a case. After 4 hours of argument on merits, we got the favor by the SESTAT on limitation only. So it is so important that we retain the evidence of receipt of SCN. In case of registered post or speed post, there is a post office tracking sheet. Print that, because post office tracking sheet is available only for few days. Take out a print, staple it with the envelope and the SCN, and then keep that in file. Make 2 copies of SCN, because like me, I like to scribble on the SCN. We shouldn't do it on original copy. So take 2 photocopies, keep one in file, and then start, because you have to read SCN at least 3 times before you start drafting a reply. If you received SCN electronically, you should retain a copy of the email or a screenshot of the portal. And if it is an additional notices, you should retain that screenshot so that you can argue it was not a valid delivery. Supply of RUDs, as I mentioned, it is a mandatory. There is a decision as well. But what people do not do, I've now started receiving a lot of show cause notices from second tier cities like my hometown, Yamunanagar, Karnal, Panipat, all Rohtak, Sirsa, Hisar. My professional brothers receive show cause notices. To my surprise, there are no RUDs. And these have no exposure of these kind of litigation. So my advice to all of you, the moment RUDs are not there, immediately write a letter to the SCN issuing authority as well as to adjudicating authority that please supply me the RUDs, which are mandatory. Recently, there is a Allahabad High Court decision also where they say supply of RUD is mandatory. So please write a letter immediately that I have received show cause notice, but I have not received RUDs. You can think that you can draft the reply, and you can draft the reply and you don't need RUDs. In a recent case where we were arguing in SESTAT in a excise and customs matter, the department said, sir, they have not attached RUDs to the appeal memo. We said that we do not want to refer to RUDs, so we have not attached. And department should have RUDs because it's them only who have issued. Now, SESTAT also knows, we also know, DR also know how it operates. Department doesn't get, or DR doesn't get anything from the department. It is all our appeal memo which they rely on. So court has said, okay, fine, we understand that, but can you provide them RUDs? Okay, provide RUDs in 2 weeks, we list the matter after 4 weeks. The fact of the matter was that RUDs were never received by the client. He never followed up. He never obtained the RUDs. And the RUDs were running into some 800 pages. We had to ask the client that you go back to the SCN issuing authority, got those files back, which were kind of I think 6 or 7-year-old, got the RUDs photocopied again, and please provide us. So this is the importance. Any stage of litigation, court may ask you to provide copy of RUDs. So if the RUDs were not provided, and even if you do not require, please obtain them. Obtain them and keep them in copy. Okay. It also happens sometime, RUD still department will give you. But अगर सर्च हुआ, उसमें बहुत सारे कागज वो सीज करके ले गए. उन्होंने कुछ डॉक्यूमेंट्स को रिलाई किया, वो आपके SCN के साथ अटैच कर देंगे. बट व्हाट अबाउट डॉक्यूमेंट्स विच वर नॉट रिलाइड अपॉन? जो रिलाई अपॉन नहीं किया है, उसमें कोई डॉक्यूमेंट ऐसा हो सकता है विच इज इन योर फेवर, or there may be your original documents which are required for audit, for income tax. It is duty of the department to issue all non-relied upon documents within 30 days. But department's duty, we all know. So if the documents were seized and they were not relied upon, please write a letter to SCN issuing authority requesting for non-relied document also. So please be very, very careful on asking for RUDs if are not provided, and for non-relied document if they were seized from your premises. This was all background to SCN. Let's now proceed how to draft a reply. And I would think that we need to bifurcate our reply on these lines. First of all, it should be, if there is a jurisdiction issue, there should be submission on jurisdiction, there should be submission on facts, submission on merits, submissions of fraud, suppression, etc., submissions of computation of tax and other amount, and submission of penalty. So every reply of your should contain your submissions on these points to the extent applicable. And let's say we go and address each one of them. Submission on jurisdiction. SCN is to be issued by the proper officer and not a proper officer. The famous decision of Canon India in customs, Supreme Court has said SCN is a review because it is an assessment. The bill of entry having been assessed by the custom authorities or self-assessed, now it is SCN is a review. The review should be done by the same authority, because the law uses the word the proper officer and not a proper officer. GSTN also uses the word the proper officer. So therefore, we will see how Supreme Court addresses that, because Canon India itself, the review is recently heard and judgment is reserved. Whether that Canon India can be applied to GSTA or not, we'll see in times to come. But you must take this ground. If your SCN has been issued by DGGI, by anti-evasion, not by your proper officer, please take this ground. You never know at what stage, what ground can come to you. That is on that point. Second is that we all see department keeps talking about cross empowerment under section 6 of the CGST. Now, recently Madras High Court issued a decision. They say, as per the said provision, there has to be a notification by the government on the advice of GST Council. There is no such notification has been issued. Now, if there is no notification, there is no cross empowerment. And SCN issued to state authorities by central to central assessees and by central authorities to state assessee is actually without jurisdiction. I'm sure department will take this decision to the Supreme Court, but please check whenever there is a notice, please check that what is the administrative authority of your assessee and whether SCN has been issued by the same authority or by a different authority. If it has been issued by a different authority, you must take this cross empowerment ground in your reply. Because as per Supreme Court decision in Kedar Shashikant Deshpande, Jurisdiction issue cannot be challenged at a later stage. If you have a jurisdiction issue, you have to take that issue in your first response, that we do not agree to the jurisdiction issue, but without prejudice, we are responding to the SCN, because department now have a whole host of arm twisting techniques. They can block your input tax credit, they can freeze your bank account, all those can be done. So please respond to SCN, but take the jurisdiction issue in your response. And if you believe that SCN essentially lacks jurisdiction, then please take that in a writ to a high court. The Supreme Court decisions, various high court decisions are very clear that if a SCN has been issued which is patently lacking jurisdiction, it is without jurisdiction, it can be challenged in a writ, and the alternate remedy would not be a bar in admitting that writ petition. So if the SCN has been issued without jurisdiction, and jurisdiction doesn't mean territorial, jurisdiction can be on a several grounds. And if we want to talk about jurisdiction, there can be maybe another session on jurisdiction itself. But if there is a jurisdiction issue you want to challenge, you can challenge that in a writ as well. And I would request that wherever there is a jurisdiction issue, that should be challenged in a writ, and you should not file a response to that SCN. Simply file a letter to the authority that we are taking this matter to a writ. Please keep this SCN in abeyance. Then we go to how you look at submission on facts. Please verify the facts very, very carefully. In my experience, errors are frequent and deliberate. It pains me to say, but there are deliberate errors in SCN. Department, while doing a search, assessee pressure में होता है, इंच की जगह फीट लिख लिया, फीट की जगह मीटर लिख लिया, and then while you do the inches to feet become 12 times liability, feet and meter become 3 times liability. Okay, department does that all the time, so please be careful. Facts सही है कि नहीं, even legal provision incorrectly quoted. अभी हमने एक रिप्लाई बनाया, the business auxiliary definition is written, the last para where it says which amounts to manufacture is not included, that para was missing. So they will quote only to the extent legal provision beneficial to them. You have to look into that also. Non-relied document, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes most important. While you reply, ask them non-relied document, tell them हम reply नहीं बना सकते, क्योंकि हमारे आपके relied upon तो आपने दे दिए, जिस पर हमने रिप्लाई करना है वो कहाँ है, वो तो है नहीं आपके पास है, you give it back to me. So ask them. Examine corroborative evidence. Department will say ये तो गाड़ी का नंबर नहीं है, this number doesn't belong to a truck, this belongs to a auto, this belongs to this. Don't go by what department is saying. Examine it yourself. And please ask for cross-examination where statements of third parties are relied upon. More than 80-90% of these fake invoice cases, my friends, will get quashed only on this ground, cross-examination. And there is a separate topic, how this cross-examination should be done, what is the evidentiary value, and how a statement given has to be admitted as an evidence. Because very briefly, there has to be adjudicating authority has to examine that witness as examiner in chief, and once he admit that witness, then offer it to a cross examination. Most of the cases it is not being done. If you have asked for cross examination, giving reason for asking for cross examination, and if it doesn't give you cross examination, you have a very, very valid ground. The courts have quashed the entire demand only on this ground. So please wherever there is a statements which are relied upon, cross examination तो मांगना ही है. My dear friends, SCN का रिप्लाई तैयार करने में एक चीज और ध्यान रखिए. Onus is on department. Settled principle है, the one who alleges has to prove. ये इनकम टैक्स जैसा नहीं है कि मेरे को कैश डिपॉजिट को एक्सप्लेन करना है. I have nothing to explain. SCN says you have committed a murder in Karol Bagh in Delhi on 26th. I will say you have not proved my presence in Karol Bagh. You have not proved my presence in 26th in Karol Bagh. That's it. I don't have to prove where I was. I have to tell you have not given me any evidence that I was there. It is their duty. In SCN, onus is on them. There is a very famous Ambalal case of Constitutional Bench of Supreme Court where they have looked into number of English law cases and they say this section cannot be used to undermine the well-established rule of law that save in exceptional class of case, burden is on the prosecution and never shifts. This is a very, very important and powerful observation by Supreme Court. Use that in all your SCN replies. That you have not been able to prove. I don't have to defend. You have to first prove, and then I will kind of put my defense. If you are not able to prove, I have nothing to say. Second is SCN must clearly state, make out case for extended period. 73, 74, 74 give you extended period because of fraud, etc. So SCN has to tell, has to very clearly make out this case. And mere non-payment is not suppression. That's also said. We will continue on this suppression only. Friends, if you look at these words, fraud, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts to evade tax. Supreme Court has said these are powerful words, strong words. But let's take a word. Can fraud be equated with mistake? क्या गलती से फ्रॉड हो जाता है? गलती से गलती होती है, फ्रॉड नहीं होता. There can be a misstatement, but can a willful misstatement be done in a mistake? Or suppression? Suppression is suppressing somebody, something. So all these words essentially require a positive act by the SSC. Fraud, he should have done fraud. Galti nahi, fraud. The provisions are not talking about mistake. Provisions are talking about fraud. Fraud is a scheme actively done by the person to deceive somebody. So there is an active action to be done. It is not talking about misstatement, it is a willful misstatement. So there is an intent here. Suppression is, so therefore the Supreme Court has said some deliberate and positive action, even the circular of the department says some deliberate and positive action is must to establish suppression. डिपार्टमेंट क्या बोलता है? आपको टैक्स देना था, नहीं दिया. अरे नहीं दिया, गलती हो गया. I have made a mistake, but that is not a fraud. That is not a willful misstatement. That is not a suppression of facts. Okay, there may be change of opinion. There may be difference of opinion. Okay, if I have to file a return, I have not filed a return. But is it a fraud? Is it a willful misstatement? It is a suppression of fact. No. So be very, very careful. It is extremely difficult. Historically, department used to fail in establishing fraud and suppression, etc. So wherever there is a notice of 74, please see whether these ingredients are there or not. Where there is a interpretation of law, Supreme Court has decided some legal provision. There is a clarification by CPIC. How can you allege fraud or suppression or willful misstatement? Because you have your view, I have my view, there was a difference in opinion, only then CBIC has clarified or Supreme Court had decided. Okay, so you cannot allege only that, okay, there may be 18% rate, I paid 12%. I believed it 12%. You have to prove that my paying 12% was a fraud. That means I was aware, I knew it is 18%. There is a legal opinion in my file, let's see, which department get. The lawyer has said, or a chartered accountant has said, this item is at 18%, and I'm still paying 12%. That department has a good case. You were aware, you were advised 18%, yet you paid 12%. But I was advised 12%. That advice was wrong. But that does not mean suppression. Then they say that you have not provided that information in the return. आपने इनएलिजिबल क्रेडिट ले लिया, रिटर्न में नहीं दिया. अरे रिटर्न में तो जो आपने रिटर्न का फॉर्मेट बनाया है वही बन दे सकता हूं मैं. देयर इज नो अदर स्पेस. सो you cannot allege suppression if I have not provided you information which you have not required. If the law require me to file GSTR 1 and 3B, I will do that. There is no space, there is no provision, there is no opportunity for me to provide any further information. If I have provided information required by law, my duty is done. You cannot allege suppression on that. And suppression cannot be alleged in case of revenue neutral. If the recipient is eligible to avail full input tax credit, then department cannot allege suppression. That's settled by Supreme Court. Now look at some of the provisions or some of the allegations being made by department in the recent times. क्या बोलते हैं साहब? You are under self-assessment, and most of you people would have seen this. That you are under self-assessment is your duty to correctly assess the tax and pay. Since you have not done that, we can issue under 74. The department did not agree with the audit and Senate credit was inadmissible. We issue 74. आपको confusion था, you did not seek any clarification from the revenue and therefore you sat on it. Okay. In a recent decision, the SESTAT has given this beautiful summary that proper officer was allowed to conduct a detailed scrutiny of return. If you had any doubt, he could have asked for information. If he has asked for information and you have not provided, there is a case with him for suppression. But if he has not scrutinized your return, whatever was required to be furnished in the return, you have furnished. He has not scrutinized. If he has not scrutinized, then it is not your fault. It is his fault or board's fault. We do not know, but it's not assessee fault. Sometimes departments say evasion could not have been detected had the audit or investigation was not conducted. Array, you could have asked for information. It was your duty to scrutinize return. Had you scrutinized return properly, that information could have been made available to you and you could have detected it. So you cannot say only audit or investigation are the tool to detect evasion. If these are only tools, all other routes should be closed. So all of these fancy arguments of department are negated by the courts. So please careful, whenever there is these kind of allegations are made, you be very careful, you counter them, that this is not a valid ground. It does not amount to fraud or willful misstatement or suppression of fact with intent, and therefore section 74 does not lie. On merits, I would not go because merit is a specific situation in each of the case, and I'm sure on whatever allegations that are there on a fact of particular case, my professional brothers and sisters are able to put together a defense. But I would say wherever there is an allegation, without prejudice, you should always say that even if the adjudicating authority were to upheld the show cause notice, I should be allowed benefit of cum duty, cum tax. So at least your liability is reduced by 18% or whatever is the rate of tax. So without prejudice, several submissions should be made, and because it doesn't amount to admission. So all these submissions should be made, and that's how you should prepare for a solid reply to the show cause notice. Add as many documents as you want, add as many case laws as you want to the show cause notice. And I'm aware that there is a limitation on the portal. They say you cannot add this, there is a 5 MB, this, that. My experience is whatever you can load on the portal, please load. Otherwise, prepare a paper book, submit to the authority in person in physical form. Today morning argued a case. They say they have not considered my physical submission. I argued how it's possible. It is a physical submission has been made. The adjudicant authority is bound to consider that submission, and the appellate authorities are agreed with me. So they are bound to do it. There is no choice for them to ignore and to say, no, we will look into only what is there in the portal. No. I have several more modes of submission. I will make use of all of them. And it is the duty of the authority to consider all my submissions before passing the order. With this, I would thank you all. Come back to Neha.
Thanks, sir. We'll quickly take the questions in the Q&A box and chat box.
Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, participants request you to please write your questions in the Q&A box or raise your hands. Sir, Munav ji पूछ रहे हैं, I got a notice for 2021 and imposed penalty on GSTR1, also added late fees. How can we reply?
Now, see, if it is a late filing of GSTR1, then penalty would be there. But what you need to be careful that whether it was a COVID period or whether there was an extension, because in my experiences that there are in several cases department has provided extension, but still the show cause notices have been issued for levying penalty. So you should be careful whether there was any extension, whether there was any COVID impact, and if none of them is there and you still filed late return, then the penalty will be levied.
और सर कोठारी सर का पहले ही क्वेश्चन आया था, कह रहे हैं सर, then would it not be absurd as purpose for which plant in both sections was distinguished will not get defeated? I think sir ये 73 74 के डिफरेंस की बात कर रहे हैं.
No. Yeah. He is talking about safari retreat.
अच्छा ठीक है.
He is talking about safari retreat.
Sir, would you like to answer to his question?
See, safari retreat would require a elaborate discussion, as it was discussed earlier also, that the phrase used in two subsections, two subclauses. One was the plant and machinery, other place was plant or machinery. And the revenue argued that plant and machinery or plant or machinery should be read as same. Plant or machinery was a mistake of law. Drafting mistake. The Supreme Court said that this litigation is 5-year-old, and if it was a mistake, the Parliament could have corrected it. The Parliament has not corrected it, and therefore it has to be presumed that it was not a drafting mistake. It is a deliberate this thing. So once there is a Supreme Court has arrived at a conclusion that it is a deliberate drafting, then the natural consequences will follow, and that's what Supreme Court has said.
सर अरविंद जी पूछ रहे हैं, ITC left to be claimed in FY 2021 COVID period. We have claimed in annual return 9. How should we go for submission?
I think now there are provisions came in section 16, subsection 5 and 16, section 6. If their case is covered within that period, then they can claim that and they can proceed. But if I know very specific facts, what is the stage, then probably I can advise better. But they should look at section 16.5 and section 16.6. That should give them the benefit.
कमल सर, आप अपनी ईमेल आईडी इनको चैट बॉक्स में दे दो, अगर फर्दर डिस्कशन ये करना चाहते हैं. बाकी मेंबर्स के लिए भी कमल सर की ईमेल आईडी हम अभी चैट बॉक्स में दे रहे हैं आपको। आयुष सर की ईमेल आईडी भी मैं दे देती हूँ। इन केस आप कोई डिटेल डिस्कशन करना चाहते हैं किसी पर्टिकुलर मैटर पे, तो ऑब्वियसली यू कैन ऑलवेज रीच आउट टू देम पर्सनली आफ्टर द प्रोग्राम ऑल्सो। Request participants to please raise their hand or write their questions in the chat box or Q&A box. सर 2 मिनट और वेट करते हैं, अगर कोई क्वेश्चंस
हाँ, कोई
नहीं
दिक्कत
आएंगे।
नहीं, नो प्रॉब्लम, नो
हाँ,
प्रॉब्लम।
कोई क्वेश्चंस नहीं आएंगे तो हम रैप अप कर देंगे।
Once this is over and whenever you have time, we can take a session, because after notices are there and the next step is adjudication. Then what should be done, whether you should ask for personal hearing, how you appear. Once the show cause reply is done, then you go for hearing. What
Right.
are the things to be done in hearing, and after that the appeal. So we should have our webinars in these three sequence. So first is this, then the adjudication and the appeal.
हाँ, ऑफ कोर्स सर, बिल्कुल एक सीरीज की तरह कर सकते हैं। जैसे कल हमारा सर टीपी का एक था वेबिनार, उसमें हम लोगों ने डॉक्यूमेंटेशन एंड ऑडिट का थोड़ा सा बताया। एंड देन नाउ वी हैव थॉट दैट बिकॉज मेंबर्स ने बहुत उसको एंजॉय किया, दैट वी कैन इंट्रोड्यूस इट लाइक अ सीरीज, जहां पर हम आगे आगे का पोर्शन भी उनको बता सकते हैं। सिमिलरली वी कैन डू द सेम काइंड ऑफ सीरीज विद यू ऑल्सो, वेर अब आगे के जो हमारे दो नेक्स्ट 2-3 स्टेप्स हैं हम वो कवर कर पाए विद एवरी वेबिनार। एंड ऑफ कोर्स सर, थैंक यू सो मच फॉर सच अ वंडरफुल डेलिब्रेशन। मेंबर्स की कॉन्ग्रेचुलेशंस आ रहे हैं चैट बॉक्स में। आई रियली लाइक इट।
Thank you. I will send you the PPT. You can share with the participants.
Yes, we'll definitely do that in our next mailer as well as on our WhatsApp groups. We'll also share the link of the YouTube video for the members who have missed it. Sir, हमारे यहाँ पे maximum members हमारे YouTube video पे depend करते हैं, and they watch it later after their office or over the weekend.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
understand.
right.
Yes.
एक क्वेश्चन आया है क्वेश्चन आंसर बॉक्स में।
हाँ सर, मैं Q&A बॉक्स में देख लेती हूँ।
Yeah.
सुरेंद्र सर पूछ रहे हैं, सर इफ क्रेडिट्स आर रिवर्स्ड in temporary reversal column, then department is telling continuously to transfer it in permanent reversal as they are getting revenue from center. Please suggest how to deal with it.
No, you have to tell them, you have to ask them to issue a show cause notice. It is a pressure tactics. See, once you have done in a temporary reversal, department has no right, it is your decision. If department insists, ask them to issue a show cause notice. It is your right. Once you have done it into permanent reversal, then it is completely gone. Then you have no remedy left. So do not come to that pressure. Ask them if they want a permanent reversal, ask them to issue a show cause notice.
वी होप सुरेंद्र जी आपका क्वेश्चन आंसर हो गया है। अगर आपका कोई फॉलो अप क्वेश्चन है तो प्लीज Q&A बॉक्स में डाल दो। इन द मीन वाइल आई वुड लाइक टू टेल आवर पार्टिसिपेंट्स कि कल वॉइस ऑफ सीए इज गोइंग टू बी इन पानीपत एंड सोनीपत, वेयर वी वुड बी डूइंग a program on income tax developments as well as transactions under PMLA, जिसमें हमारे स्पीकर स्पेशली PMLA के जो हमारे स्पीकर हैं वो उसमें कवर करेंगे कि कि कौन सी ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं ऐसी जो अगर आपको ध्यान देनी चाहिए टू प्रिवेंट एनी वायलेशन ऑफ पीएमएलए। एंड आई होप दैट जो भी हमारे मेंबर्स आज प्रेजेंट हैं एंड वुड बी देयर इन सोनीपत एंड पानीपत टुमारो, तो उनको हमारा मैसेज जरूर आया होगा एंड दे वुड जॉइन अस फिजिकली ओवर देयर। कोठारी सर प्लीज बताइए आपका क्वेश्चन। सर मैं आपको अलाउ कर रही हूँ, प्लीज अनम्यूट योरसेल्फ।
Yes, Kamal sir, very good session, very insightful, and
Thank you, sir.
brilliant
Thank
session,
you.
sir. Thanks a lot for your time, sir. So I
Thank you.
have just one curiosity, sir, that say taxpayer, they have simply availed ITC in their books of accounts and reversed it. but they have not done anything in the on the portal. And now they realize that this ITC is eligible. And now, if they claim on the portal, would it be legitimate and legal?
Sir, it is a very litigative subject. If the amount is substantial and whatever they have availed, it is documented in the books of accounts, then there is a very thin line of argument that sometime some court will decide, because in GST law for ITC, there are two words which are being used. One is the ITC is to be taken and ITC availed. If you look
Correct,
at these two words carefully, the taken word is used with reference to while you take them, and availed is used while filing return. So there is a case to argue that the requirement of 16 subsection 4 is to take ITC, and that taken is in the books of accounts.
Okay, sir.
Okay, but that is a very young issue, I would say. It is not going to reach the court. Definitely, this subject will be decided by Supreme Court only in some appropriate litigation. And in if your case having a substantial amount, then it could be worth fighting on this ground.
So in roads,
But it is not going to be an easy fight.
Got it, sir. On roads, there is that it is an accident-prone zone. So you meant to say it is a litigation-prone area.
Yes, sir. It is a litigation area. Otherwise, it is gone. The department say if you are not availed it in the return, they will not allow it. That is the position of the department. If we were to take a position against the department, definitely we have to be ready for the fight right up to Supreme Court.
Got it, sir. Thank you. So nice of you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
सर एक क्वेश्चन और है लक्ष्मी जी का. One of my clients received a notice by department asking why did they lapse credit by not claiming the same on time. Don't know how can that be an issue for them. It is funny.
Yeah. So if it is lapsed, it is, see, I tell you the background of it. See what happens when you take credit and reverse it. So let's say there is a IGST. Kothari sir, can you please mute yourself? Yes, now, thank you. Now, what happens is that if you avail the credit and then you reverse the ineligible credit, then the reversal of ineligible credit accrues to the state in which you are located. And if you do not avail the credit itself, it will remain lapsed. It remains with the originating state. So when the destination state sees that you are not availed at reverse, destination state does not get the revenue. And that is why they are writing a letter that if you want to lapse it, you first avail and then reverse. So it is the state's revenue which gets impacted, and that's why it is an issue for them. Understood, Neha ji?
हाँ सर, लक्ष्मी मैम ने भी ओके कर दिया है.
Good.
I don't think, sir, there are any more questions. अगर कोई questions होंगे, of course, our members can reach out to you on your email ID. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time for us today. And thank you to all the members for joining us today. We hope that we will stay connected and keep staying in touch through our webinars and seminars all through the year.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Okay.
Thank
Head
you.
office, please close the session.